Breaking tonight, ISIS being blamed for a terrifying attack on a wedding in Turkey. And it's now believed the suicide bomber responsible is no more than 14 years old. Hello and welcome to a special Sunday edition of Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us. We are less than 80 days away from one of the most important presidential elections of our time. And joining us tonight are Trump campaign senior advisors, as well as an all-star political panel. But first to breaking news. At least 51 people dead, dozens more wounded in what is the deadliest attack in Turkey this year. And the suicide bomber, a child between 12 and 14 years of age. Joining me now is the director of the award-winning film The Making of a Martyr, human rights attorney Brooke Goldstein. Good evening, Brooke.
Good evening.
All right. Now, it is absolutely bizarre that a religion, a theology, would call or use religion as a reason to kill their own children. What is this about?
This is infanticide. This is a form of egregious child abuse that has been ignored for way too long. Islamism has been used to justify the premeditated murder of innocent Muslim children, and politicized human rights groups, politicians, the mainstream media have been ignoring this form of infanticide. And that is what I argue to be the real Islamophobia, turning a blind eye to the abuse of Muslim children as child soldiers, as human bombs, as human shields. You're basically sending the green light, go ahead, continue using these children with impunity. Just this March, the Turkish religious ministry published a cartoon glorifying martyrdom, where the child says at the end of the cartoon, "I wish I could be killed as a martyr."
Let's talk about the religion itself and the fact that the religion apparently reveres martyrs, and this is taught to the children in madrasas. But how is it that they get these children to actually do or commit these acts? I understand some wear suicide vests, and others, they use remote devices and detonate these devices remotely?
Correct. I mean, especially, for example, in the Palestinian context, you have children that are recruited that have Down syndrome, that are physically handicapped, mentally handicapped. Children are given drugs. When I interviewed the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades in Jeanine, for example, they explained to me how they gave hashish to young children so they would be confused when they carried out these attacks. They are preyed upon because they are impressionable. But most important, you have a state-sponsored element where the Islamist media in every single Muslim majority country, from Turkey to Egypt to Saudi Arabia to Jordan, teach these children on a daily basis to revere shahada, to revere bloody martyrdom. And this is nothing less than a culture of death.
What about the parents of these children? I mean, do they actually feed this instinct? I mean, don't they want to protect their own children?
It ranges. Of course, the natural instinct of a parent, regardless of your religion, is to protect your child. When I interviewed the parents of Hussam Abdu, a 15-year-old Palestinian Arab boy who was recruited by the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades, he was paid $20 to blow himself up amongst Palestinians waiting online to get into Israel. I interviewed his parents, and they were adamant that they do not support this activity. And in fact, Hussam was told by the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades not to tell his parents where he was going. And so that is really the crime here.
So wait a minute. So what you're saying is the kid wanted $20. His parents didn't want him to do it. So then are there parents? I understand there are parents who think it's a good thing for their children to be suicide bombers. Is that correct?
There's a whole range. I mean, you cannot just, say what all parents think. In every single circumstance, it's a unique case example. There are circumstances where families, for example, are paid to give up their children. Right. The Taliban was paying up to $8,000 per child in Afghanistan, which is an enormous amount of money in Afghanistan. Sometimes children are kidnapped. Other times children are drugged. Sometimes they're taken right from the madrasas where they're fed a steady daily diet of hate and indoctrination. And also, we in the West, we perpetuate this. Do you know that the United States pays for schools run by the United Nations in Gaza and the West Bank that teach from textbooks glorifying suicide, homicide bombing? So you could make the argument that our taxpayer dollars are going towards the premeditated
what
murder
I understand
of children.
also, Brooke, is that children are sent home from some of these madrasas with Western dolls to actually behead as a part of the training that goes on in the madrasas. And you're saying that the United States is funding some of these, or the UN is funding?
The United States is correct. The United States is funding through the UN agency UNRWA children's summer camps where they are taught to become child soldiers and human shields. I did a movie on it. It's called Camp Jihad. Yeah.
All right, Brooke Goldstein, thank you for your work and thanks for being with us tonight. And last night in a Justice exclusive, I spoke with Donald Trump as the horrific terror attack at the wedding in Turkey was actually unfolding. The threat of terror here and abroad has become a critical part of the presidential race. Take a listen to what the Republican presidential candidate had to say about the attack and how the Obama administration handles the threat of radical Islamic terrorism. There apparently was another terror attack in Turkey. What would you do as president to stem all of these attacks and you know, the tide of these kinds of attacks?
Well, we have to be much tougher than we are right now. We have to be less politically correct. We have to be so vigilant with respect to other people reporting, people in the community reporting what's going on. I heard about the attack in Turkey. It looks like it's radical Islamic terrorism again, and I'm sure, of course, you know, the president won't use that term, but it looks like that, and we'll have to find out. But you know, I'm sure you wouldn't be totally shocked if it was.
Well,
but it is just a horrible thing that's going on. Nobody's seen anything like this. I mean, you go back to medieval times when they chopped off heads. It's like nobody's seen what we're seeing now: drowning in steel cages, chopping off heads, burying in sand. Nobody's seen this, Jeanine. This is medieval times.
It is barbaric. Joining me now, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin. All right, good evening, Congressman. You are on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Turkey is very important to the United States, especially given the fact that we have certain locations, certain important assets, shall I say, that we have in Turkey. With all of the uprisings that are going on, this alleged attack by ISIS, the alleged coup, the demand by Erdogan that we return someone from, I believe, Virginia, the cleric that he wants to impose death or hasn't given him 2 death sentences. How do we do this dance?
Well, it's been an increasingly difficult relationship because you have Erdogan, who started off as a more moderate, looking to stabilize his country, and what the developments have been over the course of the last few months has been a movement within Turkey in the wrong direction. We have assets right there that need to be protected. Regardless of those assets there, you also have moderate Syrian rebels that have been training, operating inside of Istanbul. You have religious leaders like Ecumenical Patriarch of the Greek Orthodox Church in there. But you also have a lot of foreign fighter movement through Turkey and the refugee crisis. So while we would maybe love to just completely be disengaged from Turkey, the fact is that's actually the wrong way to go for America's foreign policy because they are right there in the middle of a whole lot of issues that directly impact our own security here at home.
Well, but given the fact that you yourself admit that Erdogan is moving more militant, more radical, locking up cops, are you suggesting that we hand over the cleric from Virginia?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just saying that we don't really have an option to disengage from Turkey and just say that Turkey can take care of their own issues. It has nothing to do with us. We are fighting ISIS. We have a presence there that is important. But a lot of the way we're seeing Europe losing their continent and in Middle East, where we hear about attacks on U.S. troops and those traveling to Syria and Iraq to train and fight with ISIS, a lot of that foreign fighter movement is through Turkey. From that standpoint is important, but also that there's some financing of ISIS that's being alleged. So there's a whole lot of issues right now in and around Turkey that I'm just saying that we can't disengage from there.
Right, I understand. All right, I want to move on. You know, now we see the president is going to Louisiana. He didn't announce that until after Donald Trump was there. And I have to read this to you. I must tell you, it was a shocking statement by Josh Earnest today. He says, on the Louisiana visit, he says, the president is eager to get a first-hand look at the impact of the devastating floods, hear from more officials about the response, including how the federal government can assist. That's 13 days later, he's going to show up, and he's eager. I mean, how do you guys feel about that, given what they did to George Bush and Katrina?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Louisiana, this is the worst natural disaster that they've faced since Hurricane Katrina. And while the media wants to give President Obama a mulligan while he's playing golf on Martha's Vineyard, if this was President Bush playing golf days later after Katrina, the media would be calling for his head. So right now you have little boys and little girls all around the country who say, one day I want to become president of the United States. Well, what that means is not this. As soon as that natural disaster hits, your instincts are to go on the ground to stand not just with compassion and a hug to talk to victims, but to bring the support of a unified nation.
Let me ask you finally about this $400 million that we all believe was a ransom. Is there, you guys going to do anything about this, or is it just over? It's done. We sent the cash over in an unmarked plane and all that stuff.
Well, no, it can't be over. There's a couple of things. I mean, one is that from an oversight standpoint, there are still some questions that need to get answered. But also, we have a new president who will be taking office in January. We need to renew the Iran Sanctions Act, scheduled to expire by the end of the year.
Are you suggesting we can get the money back?
Well, I'm suggesting that we need to put leverage back on the table, because for everything that we need to deal with Iran's bad behaviors, the leverage was a sanctions relief. It wasn't because we asked nicely with a smile. It's because they wanted the money. So in order to bring the Iranians back to the table, we need the leverage back at the table. And we have to evolve our foreign policy where we aren't paying cash ransoms. The Iranians, they're looking at this $400 million. They're calling it a ransom. As we watch Simone Biles win gold down in Rio for gymnastics, if verbal gymnastics was an Olympic sport, this president would be winning gold.
Oh, very nice. Congressman Lee Zeldin, thanks for being with us. And Donald Trump, senior advisor Boris Epshteyn, joins me now. All right, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that $400 million, but I got to tell you, sending cash in an unmarked plane, and he said, what do you say, they don't have a bank over there or something?
Well, the issue was, Judge, that they sent the money in foreign currency, because if it had been sent in dollars, that would have been a direct violation of U.S. law. So it seems to me like that's some obstruction of justice, right? If you're just exchanging money, that sounds like money laundering.
Gee, do you think we should call Loretta Lynch right away?
Well, you know, do you think she would indict? Probably not. But she's probably on a tarmac with Bill Clinton.
Let's talk about Donald Trump.
Let's do it.
You're a senior advisor. Sea change this week. I think he had a great week this week. I told him that last night. He reached out to the minority communities. He talked to the African-American communities, the inner cities. And, you know, he talked about some really important stuff, saying that he regretted saying the wrong thing, and that he looked at the camera, and I looked at him, and he said, I regret causing personal pain. And I believed him when he said that, you know. And, you know, so how long are we going to see this Donald Trump?
This is the Donald Trump for the next 79 days, Judge.
Yeah.
This is the Donald Trump you'll see, somebody who is measured, but who is very convincing.
Why? What happened in the last week?
It's not a huge sea change.
Yes, it is.
What it is really somebody who's so focused on winning, and he knows what it takes. It takes delivering the message, a concentration on delivering the message of national security, the economy, and talking to all sectors of the American public, all people, Hispanics, African Americans. Listen, we all know cities in this country, the inner cities are devastated, Judge. They're absolutely destroyed. And Hillary Clinton has done nothing in her career except pass that awful crime bill in the 90s to help those inner cities.
Who called them super predators?
Yeah, was that Donald Trump? I didn't think so.
No, I don't think it was.
But the media doesn't want to talk about that.
But let's talk about what he needs to do to get those swing states that he's having so much trouble with. You know, with the the coal and gas and oil and the energy that we have in the United States. How is he going to help? What can he do?
Well, he's talking about lifting the ban on coal mining. And remember, Hillary Clinton said that coal jobs are gone. So that's why that Rust Belt is not going to be going for her.
But then Bill Clinton came back and said, oh, yeah, we're going to take care of you.
Well, so they're flip-flopping on all the issues. And that's what the Democrats have done for a long time. Really, the Democrats have fooled people in the American middle and lower classes into voting for them. Because if you look at what's happening in the middle class, it's disappearing in this country. And it's disappearing because of ultra-high taxes on the middle class. It's disappearing because of trade. Look, just because of NAFTA, we've lost 700,000 jobs. Because of TPP, which we know Hillary Clinton supports, we lose millions more.
Is Donald Trump in favor of the Keystone pipeline?
Yes, he is. And that was a part of the speech on the economy. On energy, he talked about lifting the ban on coal mining and absolutely building that Keystone pipeline. So everyone around the world knows that America is determined to use the resources we have here so we're not beholden to others abroad.
You know that we can absolutely support ourselves on the energy that we have in this country, and yet we prefer to rely on our enemies?
And a lot of that is because of the pay-to-play that's been going on, right? Because a lot of those groups that are not friendly to us have given money to entities like the Clinton Foundation to keep themselves in the game. You know that Russia controls 1/5 of uranium produced in the United States?
20%. Is that what that Clinton Foundation deal from the guy named Justra from Canada who gave all the money to the foundation? You need to watch my show. I talk about that stuff all the time.
And the Department of State had to approve it. Who was the Secretary of State? Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, approved it.
Yeah, that's
but there's no crossing of lines between the State Department and let me ask you a question. What does Donald Trump do this week?
This is going to be a week that's focused on immigration, keeping Americans safe and keeping American workers
jobs safe. Is he going to deport
safe.
11 million people?
The start is going to be with the illegal immigrants who are the criminals.
What?
That's going to be the start, and then he'll work with the Department of Homeland Security, with the other departments to determine what you do next. So it'll be a decision.
Well, let's say that 1 million are criminals. Then what?
You deport those first 1 million, and then you determine how to best keep American jobs safe. Is it deportation? Is it some other policy?
American jobs or American families?
Both.
At that point, jobs after the criminals are gone.
Yeah, but you have to keep in mind that just because you deport a certain amount of folks doesn't mean others aren't coming in. We have to secure the border as well. And Donald Trump has been very clear
on securing
about
building that wall?
The wall, the huge wall. We're all excited about the wall. I'm all in on the wall.
Good at you. You're all in.
I love the wall.
Boris Epstein, good to have you here tonight. Thank you. And coming up, could a federal judge's ruling against Hillary Clinton change everything? Could the lies finally catch up with her? We'll ask former Attorney General Michael Mukasey what he thinks next. Developing tonight, a federal judge ruled Friday that Hillary Clinton must answer written questions from Judicial Watch, a conservative government watchdog group that filed a lawsuit over her private email server. Here with reaction, former United States Attorney General and federal judge Michael Mukasey. Good evening, Judge. Now, I want to talk to you about a bunch of stuff. Oh, you call me Judge. That's so nice. Thank you. All right, Judge. So, I have a bunch of issues. We're going to move quickly. So the judge orders her to answer questions about her emails, but I was just reading, it's not oral, she's got to respond in writing, but he gave the group until October 14th to give her the questions, and then she has 30 days to answer them, so this is all after the election.
Right. And also, given the fact that she's answering them in writing, obviously lawyers are going to go through this and craft the language and draft the language and do all the things that lawyers do to the language. So it's not quite as good as getting it orally.
All right, but it's kind of interesting that the group is also seeking the details of Huma Abedin's relationship with the State Department that permitted her to do outside work while she was a top aide with Hillary Clinton, which brings me to my next subject, so much to talk to you about, Judge, which is that so-called wall between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department. Now, I asked myself, and I said to myself, now, if there is this MOU that's signed between Bill Clinton of the Clinton Foundation when Hillary Clinton first took the job as Secretary of State, that there would be this wall between the foundation and the State Department, how is it that someone who's working for the State Department is getting paid by the foundation? I mean, that is the antithesis of a wall, is it not?
Well, it's the antithesis of a wall as you understand it and as I understand it, but apparently the way other folks understand it, a wall has doors and windows and a whole lot of other openings in it.
And obviously
and
direct deposit in a wall.
Correct.
But okay, Judge, and I want to hear what you have to say about it. But when Senator Grassley wrote a letter to find out about it, he got a response from someone saying that the Chairman Grassley had unfairly tarnished Miss Abadan's reputation. Meanwhile, Miss Abadan is getting paid by the State Department, by the Clinton Foundation, and Teneo. Teneo is that. You know what Teneo is.
Is Bill Clinton's company.
Yeah, it's his buddy. And by the way, Bill Bratton, who just brought Hillary Clinton to the NYPD, is going to work for Teneo. So, elaborate.
Imagine the coincidence.
But Judge, that is not, why are they not pursuing this?
Well, they have to. This only came to light relative. You say they pursuing it. You mean Judicial Watch?
Judicial Watch, the FBI. If any local elected official had a staffer that was on 3 different salaries with an agency where there was a direct conflict of interest, forget about the appearance of a conflict of interest, everybody around them would be indicted for corruption, public corruption.
Well, there would certainly be questions asked, and they would be pursued. But as we know, the rules appear to be, and the results appear to be, different in the case of a Clinton.
Okay. All right. So then let's move on to reports on Preet Bharara, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, the most highly esteemed of all of the districts in the United States. There are reports that he is investigating the Clinton Foundation. Wouldn't be surprising. I mean, he is an individual who is very aggressive and has done some pretty serious cases, has an excellent conviction rate. Would it be unheard of for a United States attorney to go after a case like this when it's clear that the United States attorney, the Attorney General, I should say, from whom they would need a permission to go forward, is not likely to give that permission?
Yes, it is. There is precedent for it. When Whitney North Seymour was U.S. attorney, he pursued Mitchell and Stans and others who were members of the Nixon administration, notwithstanding that John Mitchell was the Attorney General at the time.
So the rule, so-called rule, where if you're going after someone who's running for office, you need permission from justice, doesn't preclude an aggressive prosecutor from going into a grand jury and getting an indictment.
Not at all. In fact, that rule is simply a cautionary rule. It's one that is not it's not airtight. It doesn't mean you can't seek an indictment, and he doesn't have to necessarily go after her. He can go after others in the foundation.
Interesting. Judge Mukasey, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
All right. And still ahead, my opening statement, what have Democrats done for the minorities? I'll tell you, that's next.
Live from America's News Headquarters, I'm Kelly Wright in Washington. President Obama is back in D.C. Air Force One landing just more than an hour ago, ending his 16-day vacation to Martha's Vineyard. The president has been criticized for staying and playing golf while historic floods devastate Louisiana. The White House defending his actions, saying they did not want his arrival to be a distraction to rescue efforts. The president will visit the state on Tuesday, expecting to meet with the governor in Baton Rouge. Right now, crews on the scene of a train derailment in Texas, 20 cars derailing, 5 of them falling off into a creek in Roanoke, just north of Fort Worth. Local police saying a bridge failed. The Rio Olympics coming to an end. Team USA, the medal leader, taking home 121 in all. Tokyo, Japan hosts the next Summer Games in 2020. I'm Kelly Wright. Now back to Justice with Judge Jeanine.
Last night on Justice, I told you that the Democrat Party-inspired government support for the last century has become the most abusive form of suppression and oppression in the inner cities. In case you missed it, here's another look at my opening statement. Democrat-inspired government support for the last century has become the most abusive form of suppression and oppression in our inner cities. It is keeping African Americans and minority communities from attaining not only the American dream, but a normal, safe, secure, and productive life. A supposed well-intentioned support system is chaining our minority communities to an intergenerational cycle of poverty, dependency, and depression. Now, I've spent more than 3 decades in the criminal justice system, watching crime, drugs, and gangs ravage our inner cities, drawing no distinction between children, the weak, and the elderly. But I have never heard anyone, especially someone running for office, have the audacity, the tenacity to turn a paradigm upside down the way Donald Trump did this week.
It's time for our society to address some honest and very, very difficult truths. The Democratic Party has failed and betrayed the African American community. Democratic crime policies, education policies, and economic policies have produced only more crime, more broken homes, and more poverty.
Is he right? Let's take a look. When Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton talk about the racial divide, they neglect to talk about the fact that 58% of young African Americans do not have jobs. That in fact they are worse off since an African-American president took office. So what makes anyone think things will get better under the same policies? When Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton talk about the economic divide in this country, what have they done about it? Other than Hillary Clinton magically going from dead broke to being worth more than $100 million that she'll admit to, without a business, a company, or anything other than a so-called not-for-profit corporation. And while Obama and Clinton talk about those much-needed conversations between the minority community and our law enforcement officers, they do so to the background chant, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now." Today, more police are targeted and killed than ever before. And while Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton talk about the poor and the oppressed, the anarchists, Black Lives Matter, and Occupy Wall Street, group burn down and destroy neighborhoods, where the only ones suffering are African-American mom-and-pop shops and African-American small business owners. And while they pontificate on the quality of justice for minority communities like Ferguson and Baltimore, juries, judges, and even their own Department of Justice outright reject their make-believe incendiary and divisive narrative. And in case you haven't noticed, gun crimes against African Americans in the inner cities only matter if law enforcement is involved. African American deaths, even of children on playgrounds on the south side of Chicago, just don't get the same outrage. And when this duo talk about the quality of education that young African American and minority children need to compete, they force an education bureaucracy and the unions that in turn support them, selling slick ads while children in those communities drop out or fail on those families. No vision to help children like the lucky few who have experienced the voucher system or school choice that allows them to break the bonds of the inner city and soar their way to success. Now take a look at these cities populated by the minority community, where murders are on the rise, where poverty is the norm, where guns are seen as the only form of protection, crime is the only way out, where hope is non-existent. And ask yourselves, who is running these cities? Democrats. Take a look at the numbers. Chicago has had a Democratic mayor for the last 85 years. St. Louis, 67 years. Newark, 109 years. Milwaukee, 108 years. Baltimore, 49 years. And D.C., 41 years. All major cities, all where murders go up. Folks, if something just doesn't work time after time, over and over, what does it tell you? Should you keep going with it? Should you do it again? You know what? I can't say it any better than he can.
What the hell do you have to lose?
And that's my opening statement. Up next, Donald Trump's economic advisor, Stephen Moore, is here to talk about what needs to be done to turn our economy around and get people to work. Another huge issue that is front and center for Americans voting in November, the economy, and a vital part of the embattled Keystone pipeline. Here with more, Trump economic advisor and author of the new book, Fueling Freedom, Stephen Moore. All right, Stephen, you know, your book talks a lot about the Keystone pipeline as well as the fact that the United States apparently has its own sufficient amount of natural energy that we don't need to rely on our enemies for energy efficiency. Correct.
Well, you've got that right, Judge. In fact, you know, if you look at, because of the shale oil and gas revolution that's happened just in the last 10 years in the United States, we now have the capacity, in my opinion, and many other scholars, within the next 5 years for the United States to become not just energy independent, but the energy dominant country in the world. That is, we can essentially be the new Saudi Arabia of the 21st century if we get this right. And that means, and by the way, I'm not talking about building windmills. You know, we get 3 or 4% of our energy from windmills and solar power. I'm talking about our coal, our oil, our natural gas, and our nuclear power. You put those together, Judge, we can do this. And this has huge implications for our economy, because what is the number one thing we import from the rest of the world is oil. And by the way, you know where we get that oil from, Judge. We get it from a lot of the countries that are sponsoring terrorism.
Okay,
so this is a big deal. This is a big deal for our economy.
So we stopped with a lot of this stuff because they said what? It wasn't safe, it was dirty, it was bad for the environment. I mean, very quickly, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the why.
Okay, so the reason that the left wants to shut down our fossil fuel production is because they're talking about global warming and climate change. Now, look, even if you think climate change is one of the greatest, catastrophes facing mankind.
Well, the Pope thinks it is.
Well, the Pope does, but he's not exactly a climatologist. But let me say this. Even if you believe that to be true, we're not going to stop climate change by shutting down American energy. I'll give you an amazing statistic, Judge, I bet you didn't know. As we're shutting down our coal plants, and by the way, thank you so much for mentioning what's happening in coal towns around America. It is absolutely disgusting to see these plants being shut down by the Obama administration. But you know what China and India are doing? Every time we shut down a coal plant in the United States, they build 10 of them. Okay. How is that reducing climate change?
Well, clearly. But you know, there's a political piece to it. You've got Hillary Clinton against the pipeline, the Keystone pipeline. Donald Trump is in favor of it. He gave a great speech on the economy. I know you're one of his advisors. But when you peel back the onion, it turns out that the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad owns almost all of the rail lines in the United States that connect to Western Canada. They haul most of the crude from Canada to the Midwest and Texas. And if we had the pipeline pipeline that would be competitor. Here's the rub. The pipeline would charge about $10 a barrel, and BNSF would charge about 30, and the guy who is the major owner of it is Warren Buffett, the guy who is saying, challenging Donald Trump, saying, I'll give you my tax returns if you give me yours. Isn't it all about money in the end? I mean, who knew that Warren Buffett was apparently this number one Berkshire Hathaway?
You're exactly right. There is a hypocrisy factor here. You can't make this stuff up. You're right. Warren Buffett is a major shareholder in these railroads. And by the way, if you're concerned about the environment, of course we all are. It is every study shows it's much safer to transport oil and gas through pipelines rather than using trucks and rail. And yet, because of these influences of people like Warren Buffett, we can't do what's environmentally sound. And by the way, that Keystone pipeline, I estimate, Judge, 5,000 to 10,000 jobs could be created, and we're talking about pipe fitters and welders and construction workers and truckers. Those are high-paying middle-class jobs this country needs.
No doubt. We
need those jobs.
Anyway, Steve Moore, new book, Fueling Freedom, Exposing the Mad War on Energy. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Judge. I loved your opening statement. You nailed that. You're so right.
Thank you. And still ahead, my political panel is standing by to talk Trump and Hillary. Keep it here. Justice rolls on in a moment. Not on that BNSF train, though. Quite a week for both candidates and a lot to talk about. We're going to break it down with my political panel, GOPAC chairman, Republican strategist David Avella. Also here tonight, political commentator and Clinton supporter Danielle McLaughlin. All right, guys, there is a lot to talk about. With respect to Hillary, I'm going to start with Hillary. I mean, now she's got to answer the written deposition about the emails, and then we've got the problem with they're now asking for a perjury investigation by the FBI. And I have to tell you, Danielle, although you've got Loretta Lynch who's not going to do anything and Jim Comey is not going to do anything, I really think that these requests by Republicans for what I think might be a legitimate investigation based on even the head of the FBI saying she wasn't truthful, might help the down ballot races.
Well, the down ballot races need some help because Trump is becoming problematic for the Republicans. As it relates to perjury, you're obviously a judge, I'm a lawyer. If you look at sort of the four big things that happened within the testimony for the Benghazi and what she said. So number one, she said, I never sent or received anything that was marked classified. That's true. We had these little C's in the bodies of the email.
Yeah, but the C's were marked.
Right, they weren't complete markings.
Plus, she's the one who said, and I don't want to get into the specifics, she's the one who said, you know, she knows it and she doesn't even need to have them marked.
Well,
but
right. But
does it help the down ballot?
I think it probably does. The only other thing I'll say about those three emails that they weren't actually classified anyway. So we can talk about the technicality, but they weren't actually classified. She did send classified information.
Should have said that the head of the FBI was handing a load of bull?
No, absolutely not. And I think Bill maybe should be quiet for a couple of months. I mean, we talked about this before. The idea that he met on Loretta Lynch on a plane, it's a problem. Even though if there was nothing wrong, the optics are terrible, and it wasn't the best decision. You know, I can be honest about when my people are doing the wrong thing, and I'm sorry, that was a bad move.
Let me go to David. All right, David, Donald Trump made an incredible pivot this week. He gave some major speeches. He read off a teleprompter the whole time. I think the only interview he gave this week was with Justice last night, that being us. And he's been very much on teleprompter. How long do you think that'll last?
Well, if he wants to win, he's going to stay on message, and the message he had this week is a winning message for him. The more he talks about people's security, not only their personal security, but also their economic security, he's going to attract Republicans to come back into the fold, and he's going to get undecided voters coming his way. Our polling recently in Ohio of women voters showed particularly his first ad being effective because it talked about the things voters care about, which is securing the border, defunding sanctuary cities, and deporting illegal immigrants who come here and create heinous crimes.
And you know, I want to talk about that. But David, before I go to the immigrant thing, I want to talk about the fact that Cokie Roberts said that Clinton supporters are morally tainted. Now, this woman works for ABC, PBS, I think, one of them, and you've got the mainstream media actually almost embarrassing Clinton's Trump supporters, I should say. Doesn't that work against us, or does that help people who support Trump?
Well, luckily the Beltway pundits and the political analysts aren't the swing voters in this election, Judge. It is voters that sit in states like Ohio and Florida and North Carolina and Wisconsin, to name a few. And they're the ones that's going to decide this election. And they're not worried about what Cokie Roberts or many of the pundits have to say, nothing in particular against Cokie, but they want somebody that's going to make them safer, both economically and through their personal security.
Do you think that Cokie Roberts, I mean, by saying that anyone who supports Trump is morally tainted, I mean, she has a responsibility to speak about the facts. She's in television.
And frankly,
I'm an opinion, by the way. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm an opinion too. And, you know, frankly, as a Clinton supporter, I normally get that kind of attack from conservatives. So it is a little curious, you know, really questioning your you know, where your heart is in some respects. But obviously, I do believe in my candidate. You know, entirely. So I think you're right. Cokie's a journalist.
Okay.
Stay out of it.
Quickly, because we've got to go. David, with immigration, he's going to tackle that this week. Is he going to pivot from where he was and soften it up a bit? What do you think?
It does appear that he wants to first make sure the border is secure and deal with those who are the most heinous criminals. And then past that, I think it's open for discussions with it ultimately, though, being about security.
All right, got to go. David Avella, Danielle McLaughlin, that's it for us tonight. Remember, friend me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at @Judge_Jeanine.